Welcome to the Emerald City Video Podcast. I'm Russ, and that's Zach.
Hello. How goes it?
It goes. So,
Let's pretend we just didn't record 40 minutes
yes, yes.
as a
Uh,
sidetrack. Anyway.
so one of these two will be the last Emerald City Video Podcast of
Yes.
2024. The
Yeah.
other will be the first of 2025,
Yeah.
unless
Yeah.
we get really distracted and never finish it. But um,
I promise I
so
will get it out.
we wanted to talk a little bit about and this is really low key, honestly. Like we haven't published every week like we used to ever since you moved.
Mhm.
And it just seemed like a good time for us, especially with all the stuff that both of us have coming up in 2025, to like sit down, do a fairly relaxed episode and talk about like some of the stuff that we watched this year, some of the stuff we read this year that we never talked about on the show,
Yep.
as the show has drifted more and more into being like about Hollywood and physical media and business and all of the things that we talk about instead of reviewing movies.
Mhm.
Um, I've got my letterboxd open, which I've done a
Yeah.
reasonably good job of updating this year.
Well, I want to, since I like doing this, let me very quickly, because physical media,
Yeah,
I picked up, it's a combo of like Christmas presents from family and stuff I just saw on sale at the end of the years. Ended up picking up Indiana Jones Dial Destiny finally, the Blu-ray. I feel really bad. I didn't see this in theaters, and I was so pumped for Horizon, Kevin Costner's
yeah,
epic. Finally picked that up. Obviously, as you can see, it's still in the plastic, so I haven't seen it. Finally broke down and bought the Blu-ray of Bamboozled, one of
nice.
my favorite Spike Lee films of all time. Have a deeply uncomfortable memory of seeing this in theaters with my extraordinary, and I say just like she's very white girlfriend at the time
Yeah,
at in the Harlem theaters, and like laughing, but because I know Spike Lee, like, I know what references he's making, and be like, no one else is laughing. This is not good. Um,
yeah.
Mountains of the Moon, which is a film that we're gonna have to review and talk about because this is a traumatic film, like film I was obsessed with back when my aunt had it on beta. And there's a scene where they have to pull something out of a guy's ear, like using it's one of the most like it trauma of like sleeping outside for years. Um, and then another one we have to do because weirdly people were doing a flashback of history of remembering that the California Raisins had an entire film like that was released in
Oh
theaters,
yeah.
which I saw in theaters because of course I did. My aunt and I don't know why we saw it. I don't know what she brought me, but we're the only two people in the theater seeing it. But at the same time, which is one of those like Mandela effect, that is a Mandela effect. I'm always that like two
Yeah,
things got combined in my brain. I thought that the California Raisins did a whole story about Mark Twain and everything like that. No, it's this film, The Adventures, Will Vinton's The Adventures of Mark Twain, which is a claymation telling of Mark Twain using his stories, going on adventures and stuff like that. I don't think anybody, yeah, I don't think anyone of any really significance is in it. But like my memories of Mark Twain is so much in this film, not memories of Mark Twain, but like my
right.
historical knowledge is based in this, which is probably one of those like, oh, that's why I'm wrong about.
Yeah,
But anyway, those are those. And then um very quickly, that my aunt got me, she knows me well, um John
very nice.
Carpenter's anthology, which comes with this great, which I forgot to bring my record player from home. So yeah, the record player mat that has like
Oh
all
yeah, yeah.
the husky and the yeah. Um,
Nice.
and then finally, my aunt also got me, which I love. She has this massive movie poster collection. Like we're talking about like
Hmm.
probably like 2,000 movie posters, like going back from the 70s on. It's probably worth a small fortune. It's just like
Yeah.
upstairs in the thing or whatever. But she gave me her original Full Metal jacket
Oh nice.
poster, which the giving to me, which I love because there's been a couple that she's given to me. She's like, so I'm giving you this. Do you want me to get it out of the collection and give it to you, or is it just okay up there? And I'm like, it's okay, just keep it up there because I haven't framed. I have a bunch of
Yeah.
posters and things I haven't framed. But she got me Matthew Modine is doing a
Oh nice.
book about Full Metal Jacket and thing, photo book. This is uh, a photo that he took on the set of Full Metal Jacket. It's Stanley Kubrick's chair and signed by Matthew himself, which is
Nice.
very awesome. So anyway, that was the
And his daughter, as you know,
yep.
is one of the two girls from Satanic
Yes.
Panic.
Oh, I forgot the last thing that I bought on eBay. Basically the entire
Oh,
collection of
nice.
Tom Lehrer because I just realized I'm like, I don't own. I'm sure I used to own all of his CDs and everything like that, and this came up on eBay.
Yeah.
It was like $15 or something like that. I'm like, okay, I guess I'll just keep
I
that in
think
my car.
I think all of mine are digital because he made them all available when he dumped them into the public
Mhm.
domain.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, so I've got everything, but like it would take me time to find it.
yeah, yeah. Same.
Yeah, I don't have all my stuff sitting around here just now. I do have Zach's gift to me, uh, which is Ernest Goes to Camp on VHS, and there's a Hey Vern, It's My Family album VHS tape
Yeah.
as well. Uh,
Nice.
because
Ooh,
we've
it's
been
sealed and package.
it is, yeah, and it's got like what I think it's a Hollywood Video price sticker on it, those triangle ones.
Yeah.
Um, and here's the only other thing I have right at hand. I have a Phase Hero hat, which is Brandon Davis and Aaron Perrine and Jamie Jirak and Jenna Anderson's new podcast. They all
Nice.
used to do a podcast at Comic Book, and
Mhm.
when they all got laid off, they decided to just take the show on the road, so to speak.
Mhm.
Especially because Comic Book just shuttered the show instead of like continuing with new hosts.
Yeah.
So I've been very doing my best to support those guys because they deserve
Mhm.
better.
Yeah.
But the so I made that's the fifth of five. I made the four hosts hats. Not I personally,
Nice.
but like I bought them from Queensboro for Christmas
Yeah.
and sent them all out this morning, yesterday, one of the and because of course it came on the 26th. Um,
Of course. Yeah.
but like so you should if you like Marvel and DC stuff, you should definitely go listen to that show. It's on YouTube and also on all the pod things. I set up his um, what do you call it? The podcast hosting website. I can't remember
Podbean?
the huh?
Podbean or
No,
Libsyn?
Libsyn, yeah, I set up
Yeah,
their
yeah,
Libsyn
yep,
account for them.
yep.
Because it's actually funny. It's one of those things where BD was like, "So how do you do that? Because you've done this before." And I was like, Libsyn's actually a huge pain in the ass. Why don't I just do it for you instead of trying to explain it?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then I go on there, and it's like, "Oh no, they've made everything much more user friendly
Oh,
now." I didn't need to do that. It was incredibly easy to set up now. Um,
nice.
Libsyn is
No.
still limited relative to some of the other hosting services in terms of like you can't have unlimited bandwidth
Mhm.
still.
Yeah,
So you're paying more money for less, but also like Libsyn does a lot of the heavy lifting for you.
yeah,
Um, but like I literally was just like, I'll just set it up for you. I'll pay for the first month because that way I don't have to explain this shit show of a setup.
yeah,
And then I get in there and I'm like, oh no, this is super easy now. Like
yeah,
big a lot of credit to them because like for a long time just being the industry standard
yeah,
allowed them to be consumer hostile. They were just
yeah,
like, you're gonna do the work because like otherwise you don't get on our platform.
yeah. That's why I
And
never used it because I always looked at them
yeah,
and like, okay, I'm just gonna go to Podbean. I'll pay a little bit different, not even more, but yeah, anyway, but yeah.
but anyway, they're good people. They do fun stuff. I was talking to BD the other day. I was like, in like 6 months, you'll have had enough interviews that we should do like ECV Analog should publish a Phase Hero interview book where we just
Yeah,
do the transcriptions for them and like crowdfund a thing. Um, so who knows? That might very well be in the future. And
cool.
after talking to him briefly about that, I was like, that's a good idea. I should do that for some other folks too. And so I've got some of my comic book friends who like own their own stuff because obviously people at Screen Rant, people at Comic Book, people at CBR, stuff like that, they don't own their copyrights.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but I've got a couple of people who I know who I'm going to reach out to and be like, hey, you want to do an interview book?
Mhm.
Because again, much of what 2025 is going to be is me reaching out to people and being like, hey, uh, we should uh, we should publish your thing. Like you should make a book. So the we want like that's a thing that I want to do in the coming
Mhm.
year. And so there's a bunch of people I'm going to be pitching about potentially working with an ECV analog. Um, I actually, in the time since we did our last podcast,
Mhm.
I've taken on two freelance jobs that I can kind of talk about now. One of them, I'm doing some editorial copywriting for Oni Press, which is a comic book publisher. They've been around since '97. Their first big hit was Clerks, the comic book, and their most well-known projects are Scott Pilgrim versus the World
Uh,
and Genderqueer, which is one of the
mhm.
most banned graphic
Oh.
novels in history. Um,
Mom's, yeah. Obviously I cover the political world, and holy shit,
yeah, yeah.
moms, the moms groups. I think that they probably account for like 20% of the sales of that book.
Oh, for sure.
I just That's something I've joked with them before at tables where we're like, how many copies do you think Moms for, I think it was Moms for Liberty is
Yeah.
really obsessed about it. How many copies do you think you guys have bought of that? And like they did not like that joke because realizing that like they've probably bought at least 1,000 copies of that book because
Oh
it's
yeah.
out on every single table you go to because they want to show how horrible it is. And it's just like,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
it's a sketch drawing of sex. Oh my God.
Yeah, yeah.
Your kids watched Game of Thrones. Shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
Like, like like, come on. You all know
Yeah.
you did. Like, but anyway.
But yeah, so I'm doing some freelance copywriting for Oni, and I'm also
Mhm.
going to be doing starting theoretically today, but really it'll be at least a week, I think, before I'm actually getting published. Um, Work at Screen Rant, which is another like entertainment news website. I'm going to be exclusively writing about comic books there. So
Nice.
I'm back to like literally my job title is like senior reporter comics. And like in the training
Yeah.
materials, they're just
Yeah.
like, you're not writing about the fucking movies. You're writing about comic books.
Nice.
Which
Nice.
is a lot of fun for me. The only
Yeah.
downside to that is that I've fallen out of love with a lot of Cape comics over the last 10 years because
Yeah.
not having to do them for work, it's like, oh, I can just ignore some of the ones I don't like. And
Yeah.
so now I
Yeah.
have to get back into like picking up the like all the Marvel and DC events and stuff, whether or not I'm excited about them.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
either way, I'm doing a lot of comic book stuff, and I'm hoping that having just those two freelance gigs is going to leave me enough, is going to pay bills and also still leave me enough time that like I can focus on ECV, which is really what
Yeah.
I want to do this year. Uh,
Yep.
After I'd already gotten two freelance jobs, I got a thing from the state of New York that was like, "Hey, did you know you could stay on unemployment for 13 weeks and uh, run your own business, and like we'll pay you. You don't even have to apply for jobs. It's just like,
Yeah.
and I'm just like, great. I would have done that. I would have focused
Yeah.
on the fucking publishing house, except that
Yeah.
you told me this after I it was like week
Yeah.
4 and I already had a job.
You're also a very, as somebody who lost their job several times while living in New York, and because I was self-employed
Mm,
contractor, couldn't apply for it. And then the pandemic happened, and I literally had to like contact my legislator, which is not something I do other than for work usually, and
right.
being like, "Hey, I lost my job, and according to the COVID guidelines for unemployment, I'm supposed to do it, but Andrew Cuomo's office is fighting it like hell." And thankfully, back then, I had, when Twitter was a lot more
Yeah.
powerful for this sort of thing, I was just ranting about it continually. So I had them legislated. Somebody from Cuomo's office contacted me or whatever.
Nice.
And I was just like, yeah, no, finally did it and got unemployment and ran my business while
Yeah.
after losing my job working in the White House, working not in
Yeah.
the press thing for journalism, not for Trump. Anyway, but that would have been its own story.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Um, but yeah, so where do you want to start? What do you want to talk about from 2024? What's the thing that jumps out at you the most?
Oh my God. I it's I mean, this is like one of the problems is that, remember, both of us live in basically the fuck off land when it comes to cinema, which is
Yeah.
we live in a place that isn't New York City or LA. And so it's like one of those, like, everybody's writing their best of lists and their favorites of the list. And I was like, oh, they just came to the theaters. Like, this is something
Yeah.
that's like my continual rant at, like, follow a bunch of like filmmakers and everything like that on Twitter and be like, yeah, I'd love to see this film. It would be fantastic to see this. If you want to complain about the fact that no one's watching your movie, and it's like, or this movie, and it's just like everybody should be seeing this film. I'm like, okay, I just checked. nothing within 150 miles of Norfolk, Virginia is showing this. I have to drive to
Yeah.
DC like 3.5 hours away to do. Anyway, this is a rant that I just wanted to say as we talk about films that always, because I'm like, I would love to, like Nosferatu obviously just came out. So like,
Yeah.
but other people have been seeing it and talking about it for ages. Um, I I hope, and I know the last thing we just talked about is I'm going to do something or whatever. I really hope that in 2025 and in future, I hope that we see a lot more um, of films like werewolves.
Hmm.
This is my obsession for the year. I finally got my mom to watch it because it's now available on demand.
Yeah.
And supposedly it's gonna be the February 15th, I think it was, physical media release. I only see a DVD right now, not a Blu-ray or anything like that, so I'm just waiting before I
Yeah.
pre-order it. We talked about werewolves in the last episode. If you didn't miss that,
Yeah.
feel free to check that out. Um, and but I want to see a lot more of that type of movie goes to Hulu, goes to whatever, which is fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
This is the world we live in now. But I want to see more of that in film cinemas. I think I would have loved that movie even if it had just gone directly to. There's been a bunch of those kind of like not quality. I don't want to talk about quality, but like B level B
Yeah.
level horror or thriller or whatever films that have been going direct to Amazon, direct to Hulu, direct to whatever. But like werewolves, I'm not quite sure why, other than maybe it couldn't find a home. Maybe the director seemed to be really obsessed with getting it in
Yeah.
theaters, which totally understandable. I just really released a film this year. I would have loved to have seen it more in theaters. Um, but I want to see more of those in theaters. I less of,
Mhm.
which I know is probably a big ask considering we're finally getting a bunch of DC and Marvel films
Yeah.
back in theaters, which are gonna just own everything. But it's just like I look at what's up at theaters right now in my local Regal, and it's just like whatever the big Disney thing is, whatever the big um Red One was one that was
Yeah.
everywhere, which fair, it's a Christmas movie, and they gotta, and that's it. And then there's like one showing of something, one showing of something. Like, I mean, like that was our experience trying to see werewolves was we were going to
Yeah.
have to drive to fucking Rochester an hour and a half away to go see it
Yeah.
where it had one showing, I think it was a day at like 7:30, at 7:30.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just that's what I hope that we see more of in cinemas this year. So, or this coming year.
I will say, ironically, I think that I was like looking at my letterbox, and it's like I saw some good stuff this year, but a lot of like the stuff that I enjoyed the most, watched the most, blah
Hmm.
blah blah blah, blah, is like uh is stuff that I'm watching for the first time, but it's not new.
Yeah.
Um, I this year my wife and I sat down and watched all three of Kenneth Branagh's Hercule Poirot movies,
Hmm.
and I was just like. Oh, like they're not perfect, but they're exactly what I want out of that
Yeah.
movie. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Um, and I do feel like there's again that's like a mid-budget. I feel like those movies probably cost like $75 million. It's probably like
Yeah.
Deadpool one kind of money.
Yeah.
Um,
And that probably 90% of that is that basically every A-list,
yeah,
Academy Award, like every one of those films has like 30 Academy Awards sitting at
yeah.
home. Like,
Yeah, and I mean there's but I have seen as much as like we've been talking for a while about escalating budgets and how they're getting out of control and it's doing real damage to Hollywood. I've seen a bunch of stuff this year that wasn't great, but it was good and it was entertaining and it was like a mid-budget.
yeah.
Like I watched both of the two Guy Ritchie uh something the Ungentlemanly Warfare,
Yeah.
and then there was a second Guy Ritchie movie that was basically the same thing. I don't remember what it was.
Yeah.
But those two were both a ton of fun. I think we watched Ungentlemanly Warfare again later. Um,
Yeah.
Beekeeper Guy Ritchie, or was
Beekeeper was
that
this
no?
year.
That was
Beekeeper.
That was David Ayer, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And again, like not a great movie by any stretch. Like here uh on Letterboxd, I gave it 3 stars. But it was like
Yeah.
it it's like, hey, what if we did The Kingsman, but like dumber?
Yeah.
Um,
Or if we just,
I
I mean, like this is something I like. I think that there was an arc watching the arc of um Jason Statham's career has been hilarious because
Yeah.
it went from, I mean, this was 40, according to Google,
Yeah.
$40 million, made $153 million, decent.
Yeah.
And especially decent for, 2024. But
Yeah.
like it went from Jason Statham just kicking the living shit out of people that have like they basically normally a B level action
Yeah.
script kind of thing with like B level or even C level kind of like ridiculous characters like Josh Hutcherson's role in
Yeah.
that film is like
Oh my God.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like everyone's, and then you find out, spoil a little bit of spoilers, like if you haven't seen it, I don't know what. Oh, I forgot Minnie Driver was in that. But anyway, but like he's the son of the president, which is weird, and there's just like has
Yes.
this like ridiculous kind of thing that normally you would never see in like an A-level film, which this
Yeah.
is
And
at
it, that
least
was
supposed to be.
that was very like 1995. Like I
Yeah,
remember a
yeah,
bunch of movies in the 90s where the twist would be like, surprise, the bad guy's the vice president. Like
yeah,
wasn't
yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
in
Mm.
either the Pelican Brief or Conspiracy Theory, one of those,
One
wasn't
of
it
yeah,
like surprise, it's like
one of
either the
those. Yeah, I
VP
can't
or
remember
the
which it is, but yeah, it's
the
like
head of
that.
the
It goes that
FBI
high
or something.
level. Yeah, yeah,
Um but like yeah, it felt very, and again, like you and I have talked about this a lot, that like those like that kind of like cheap 90s action movie is still really fun, and
Mhm.
like every time they make one of those in Hollywood, it's like it's dumb fun. It's not great.
Yeah,
Sometimes not even good, but they're really watchable and they're
yeah,
cheap. Like,
yeah,
Beekeeper reminded me a lot of Skyscraper, the
yeah, yeah,
Dwayne Johnson,
yeah.
um, and it's just like, yeah, no, it's something that like if you like that actor, it's something you can turn on and kind of ignore, and but
Mhm.
it's fun and you can like
Yeah,
talk through it, have a drink, play on your phone, um,
yeah,
and that's not necessarily the ideal kind of movie you want to pay $21 to see in theaters, but it is the kind of thing where like if you're watching most of your things at home on streaming, um, just a delight,
yeah.
like
But it also is, it's not the kind that you necessarily want to like per se, like
yeah,
you want the big Marvel action,
yeah,
piece or whatever. But on the other hand, it's, again, like werewolves, like Beekeeper, it's
yeah.
fucking great to watch like
Oh
just
yeah.
people kick just fight sequences on a big screen as
Yeah.
opposed to on a tiny screen.
Yeah.
Even if you do
And
have the
also like
60-inch
it
TV or whatever.
it fills the screen. It's
Yeah,
not like, because that's the like even Marvel movies, it's
yeah,
like two-thirds of the screen is visual effects, and like
yeah,
you when you're actually like the things that you're supposed to be looking at, if you're not
yeah,
just admiring the art of the VFX workers, like
yeah,
the objects on screen you're supposed to be looking at are usually like 30% of the screen.
yeah,
A lot of these big action movies, it's like, no, there's an explosion up here and somebody's falling down. It's like the Cutthroat Island, where it's
yeah.
just like, uh, yeah, Cutthroat Island is not a masterpiece, but like every set piece filled the screen. Like it
Yeah,
was a really engaging
yeah,
movie. It has that same appeal as like not Michael Mann, a Michael Bay movie,
yeah.
um, where like say what you want about Bay, but like he's got visually interesting films. It's the whole thing with the stupid helicopter. You know what I mean?
Sorry, I just had
Um,
a like what a great book idea. Just say what you want about Michael Bay, and then just the entire film is like praising Michael Bay. That would be anyway.
there's
But
actually, I can't remember who wrote it. I want to say maybe it was Matt Zoller Seitz. There's a book out there called Michael fucking Bay.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and
yeah,
I've never read it, but it's been on my list forever because I'm just like, well, that seems like that'd be fun.
yeah.
Um, yeah, another one that kind of falls into that same category, by the way, in terms of like, it's not good
Mhm.
exactly, but it was a lot of fun. Was Damsel? I don't know if you saw Damsel.
Yeah, yeah. The my only problem with it is I felt like I had already seen it before, with the princess.
Yeah, and that's
Obviously
what I was
there's a
gonna
lot of
say.
okay, yeah,
Yeah, that's what I was gonna, like.
yeah,
I will say that I liked the princess a lot better, and
yeah,
like, it's very similar. Obviously, um, the thing with Damsel is that she's being sacrificed to a dragon, and
yeah,
so it's like a fantasy movie as opposed
yeah.
to like the princess is like Die Hard in medieval England or
Yeah, yeah,
whatever.
yeah, yeah.
Um, but like it's other than that, it's like very similarly executed, very similar kind
Mhm.
of premises. And again, Damsel was messy in the sense that like you could see like you're supposed to believe that she's incredibly smart and incredibly accomplished and all this kind of stuff. But like as an audience member, you could see the exit strategy
Hmm.
from the first 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And you're just sitting there the whole movie going like, when are you gonna do the thing? Because the
Yeah.
like the exit is obvious, and
Yeah.
so like that was the big thing. And like one of again like to compare it to the princess, like I thought that the princess held together a lot better because there wasn't an obvious like pull in case of emergency. Like she
Yeah.
just had to get to the end of the movie. Whereas
Mhm.
with Damsel, there was no end of the movie. There was no place that she was gonna go and be
Mhm.
safe without first addressing the fundamental problem. And
Yeah.
so, like, the fact that the entire movie you're watching going, like, I know how to fix this problem. Why isn't she figuring it out? Was frustrating. But
Yeah.
again, like, it was a lot of fun. I think we watched it 2 or 3 times because, like, Callie showed it to a couple of different people.
Yeah.
Um, uh, yeah, I mean, again, there's really not that many, like, big blockbustery kind of movies that I was super excited about this year and that I really loved.
Yeah. I would say the
Uh,
one, obviously we're jumping all over. Oh, sorry, unless you had somewhere
no,
you
no,
were
no, no,
going. No,
no.
the one I'd say, or I'll just combine the two of them together is, or actually is the Fall Guy. I thought
Hmm.
was I'm pissed at myself. I wish it would be released in theaters. I somehow just because I was traveling for work and releasing my own film and
Yeah,
everything like that. I was just kind of all over the place and somehow missed the release window, which was pretty sizable. I think it did
yeah.
okay, right?
That's a
Um,
pretty well.
and then saw it on home video, which home video. I saw it on what was it, Paramount, I think. It was
Yeah.
released. And oh my God, it was just fun. It was just a ton of fucking fun. I mean, like uh, everybody in the cast was great. The kind of like out of this person who has this talent to do this thing
Yeah.
and like but now has to really do it is just like loads of fun of like and then his
Yeah.
luck. Also the coffee somebody pointed out, which I think I probably noticed it, but I didn't really think about it, is that he's looking for coffee the entire time. And somebody on Reddit was just like, I remember this as a running gag in another film. And what a motherfucking film was Hudson Hawk.
That's an
So
Hawk. Yeah.
but I just was like, I gotta know now. I gotta know if that was like actually a
Yeah.
callback to that. Um, but that see the um, I apologize. I'm going through Alien Romulus was I really hope it's going in like the alien kind of world is going in that direction.
Hmm.
We have Prey was such a great like twist on the Predator kind of franchise and just
Hmm.
like in a way that like broke like I broke my brain to some extent on just being
Right.
like I mean, like the Predator was like this side kind of thing, and you just had these great actress was amazing in it. Everybody was, and like this cinematography was great.
Hmm.
Um, my only complaint with Alien Romulus is it was a pitched. I had to literally turn off every single light in the entire house, and
Oh yeah.
even the Christmas lights behind it, behind the TV was like too bright. It's just so dark, but it's a really gorgeous film. It's really well acted. I didn't know where it was going, and I had just kind of redone, like
Yeah.
done a whole rewatch of the whole Alien series, including the good and bad ones, and forgot how much I love that series and
Hmm.
so much. And this was so good, and I hope that it kind of with really young actors, probably actors. I'm sure that actors are the same age as Ripley and everybody at the same time, but it's like realizing
Right.
like these are kids, these are children that are in this.
Yeah.
I mean, like literally, like the actresses look like they're like 21, and I'm sure they are. But it's just like, and they look like 21-year
Yeah.
olds now, which is also an interesting thing because obviously you watch all the other ones and it's kind of like they're still in that alien world, the original one, and kind of imitating it. And this is very much, this feels like a lot of the new Star Wars stuff that are getting
Hmm.
people very pissed off because you have women that look like women do now, and how
Yeah.
sci-fi fans and don't usually or Star Wars fans, I'll just be even specific, don't really like that.
Yeah.
I'll say. But I was a huge fan of it. It's definitely something I'm gonna end up picking up
Mhm.
on physical media when I get a
Mhm.
chance because I think it's
I
something
I
that
kick myself because I missed the window to get the VHS. Um,
Yeah, that would have been
I don't
fun.
know if you saw they actually did an official VHS release through Walmart,
Yes. Yeah, yeah. I looked
and
for it and I never saw it. Yeah.
I had it open on my because somebody like reported. I think here's what happened. Comic Book reported on it the day that I got laid off, so I had
Oh,
like
see.
opened it up to buy it, and then
Yeah.
got distracted by getting laid off, and then by
Probably
the
also
time I
not a
got
good
back,
idea to spend $40 on on a VHS tape, you know.
yeah, no.
Yeah.
But by the time I got back to my computer, it was academic anyway because it had all sold
Yep.
out.
Yeah.
Um, but like, yeah, that's um, and that was funny. That was right around the time I think I had like a string of screeners I got that were all pretty good.
Hmm.
Um, and I can just kind of run down this like window of time in like September, October. I
Yeah.
saw Fly Me to the Moon. I don't know if you ever watched that one or not.
I haven't seen it. I just got Apple Plus again, so I'm gonna end up watching it.
Yeah. I thought it was fun. I mean, again, it's not a masterpiece, but it's a
Hmm.
solid movie. It's a lot of fun. Greg Berlanti directed it, who is the guy who did the Arrowverse.
Hmm.
Um, but um, I was I bristle at the concept a little bit because obviously, like, the idea of like there's a conspiracy to fake the moon landing,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
just emboldens all of the world's worst people.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, But the way that they do it, I thought was good. Basically, it's like there was a conspiracy to stage the moon landing, but it was only going to be used if we failed to land.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it's basically you have two things going on at the same time. You have like the moon landing, and then you have this group of people who are like, okay, if it all explodes, we have to fake it down here. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. That's
um,
I mean, obviously that the kind of thing happens, but it's like it's always terrifying me. Like, imagine we live in a world where we did actually fake the moon landing.
yeah, yeah.
It's-
Um, but I thought it was really well done. I mean, again, like both it came out right after Wolverine did, and so Channing Tatum was like uh very much on everybody's radar.
Yeah.
I thought that it's interesting because like I think he's a really likable actor, but
Hmm.
him and Johansson, it might be the first time I've seen him actually have chemistry with anybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I could see
he's a
that.
really
Yeah.
likable actor, but anytime I see him in a romance, I'm just like, yeah, but he looks like a buckethead. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and for whatever reason, him and Johansson really clicked.
Hmm.
I also thought, and I texted my friend Suzanne, who is Greg Berlanti's like publicist. After getting out of the movie, I was just like, please tell Greg like that I love it when people can pull a great performance out of Ray Romano because
Yeah.
like Romano is actually really talented when he's not just being Ray Romano.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but pretty much everybody hires him to just be Ray Romano.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Romano is terrific in that movie. He only has like maybe 10 minutes of total screen time,
Hmm.
but he's really good. And that he was the thing that stuck out at me the most because it's like everybody else was kind of doing what you expect from them.
Yeah.
Everybody else was very much like it's like yeah they were good, but also it's like Woody Harrelson was good, but he was just being Woody Harrelson. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Uh, and uh, he's another one too, though. I thought he had terrific chemistry with Johansson. Obviously, it wasn't romantic chemistry because she is like hooking up with uh, Channing Tatum in the movie, but
Hmm.
like one of the key relationships in the movie that it wasn't advertised at all is the
Yeah.
way that Woody Harrelson's like spin doctor character has
Yeah.
to like interact with Johansson. Like I thought that was a really terrific dynamic. Um, so I watched that, and then the 4:30 movie, which we talked about in an episode that I think never went out. I don't know if that one actually got released.
I'm not sure.
Um, but 4:30 movie is Kevin Smith's most recent thing. I thought it was really charming. I think it's his most accessible and kind of broadly likable movie since forever, since Dogma, probably.
Yeah.
Um, I don't like it's not my favorite Kevin Smith movie in a while, but it is like I thought it was really well done, and I think that like I'm bummed that it didn't get a broader release. Like
Yeah.
he went and he did he's been self-releasing all these movies and then he'll go through like Fathom events. We'll do the premiere for Clerks 3
Yeah.
and for Reboot and all that. Lionsgate bought this movie. Like they
Mhm.
distributed this film. But like it probably got a smaller overall release than the movies that went out through Fathom
Yeah,
because
yeah,
like I couldn't go see it close to me.
yeah.
Luckily, I had seen the movie early enough. If you go on the Substack, you can see that video I did where I talked to Kevin Smith, and Kevin was like, "Yeah, you were the first person outside of my circle who like texted me about the movie and gave me
Yeah,
feedback
yeah.
because they sent me the review copy so that I could interview him." And I was just like, okay, well, they sent it to me at like 8 at night, and then I got my kids in bed by 9:30, and at 9:30 I was watching it because I'm just like,
Yeah,
well, that's what I'm doing tonight.
yeah,
But it's basically like a loosely dramatized version of like him as a teenager and like basically how he decided he was going to become a director.
yeah.
Somebody uncharitably called it like the Fablemans if Steven Spielberg grew up to make shitty movies. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
which
God.
is like I had no interest in the Fablemans, and again, I love Spielberg, but like there was something, and we definitely talked about this before, but there's something weird about the mythologizing aspect of the Fablemans
Yeah,
that like doing it yourself feels really strange. Whereas
yeah,
with Kevin, like it's all very like he's making fun of himself, you know?
yeah.
He's
Also,
like this
that's
isn't
all he
the
does. He
legend
makes
of
films about his, yeah, friends and
yeah,
everything like
this
that.
is
Yeah,
it's the legend of Kevin Smith. It's just
yeah,
like this is, that time in high school that I wanted to get laid and
yeah,
watch
yeah.
Fletch. Um,
It's also like one of those like I haven't seen Fablemans. I'm sure I it's on my list of things to just watch at
yeah,
some
I mean, I'm
point.
sure
But
it's a good movie,
yeah,
but like
yeah.
I'm put off by the premise because it like transparently so mythologized
I put
and
off
it's
by anybody who can get into meet was it John Ford? I'm trying to remember
yeah,
what yeah. Anyone who can like have that accessibility to get into where it's just like I'm glad he puts it in the film that like
yeah,
obviously and also I don't think John Ford didn't like help him or anything like that like
no,
but it's just like if you can walk in the room and like get in there like there's like a certain level of like oh okay oh
yeah, there's some
yeah
access here that
yeah
I
yeah
didn't know
yeah
about.
yeah
Yeah.
Kevin Smith was in
Um,
New Jersey you know
yeah.
like
I I do love just on principle the idea of casting David Lynch as John Ford.
yeah, yeah. No, I love that scene because it's always on TikTok and everything like that. So I've watched
Yeah,
that scene like a dozen times. It's really good,
yeah,
especially considering it does make like it's a really good point about you know at least Spielberg is if no, he also was a person who just loves cinema as well. Like we were talking
yeah,
about Tarantino before, and and it's just like showing that like oh he does have references because I think a lot of there's like different eras of film geeks that like oh this is the first person that invented cinema and it's just
yeah,
like not because I mean it's not a rant but like the thing realizing more and more that like Netflix doesn't have anything past like 2005 at
right.
all like somebody wrote a piece about just like
Yeah,
Netflix put up some like film from like 1995 or something like that and be like it's by far the oldest piece of cinema on the site and it's just like
yeah,
what the how are people because I mean like obviously everyone's not like us where we have 17
right.
different we're paying $75 a month for streaming networks because we must be able to have access to everything at all the time.
Yeah,
This is one of our problems of movie working in movie store
yeah,
movie rental places where it's just like we used to have access to everything all at once. But now we lost it once the movie
yeah,
stores went away, and now we have a chance to be able to see everything. Um, but it's like wild to me that like there's kids grow there's kids these days don't have access to like not even like I'm not talking Casablanca, not even like Citizen Kane and shit
yeah.
like that. I'm talking about just like
Jaws.
like I just rewatched one of the films that I rewatched for the
Hmm.
first time since probably like 99 was The Package
Oh yeah,
with
Hackman.
yeah, Hackman. Sorry. I can
Okay.
never not say it, Hackman. And I forgot there's a whole like Nazi like storyline
Hmm.
in this where he's actually going up against a group of Nazis, and it's just like, how the fuck did I not remember this? This is my world, sadly,
Yeah,
of bad life choices. But like this is the world I study, and I was just like, I completely forgot about it. How much I love like that era of like it's like we talk about kind of just like the shitty, not Beekeeper, but the kind of like
yeah, yeah,
just $20 million, or I'm sure I don't know, probably like $8 million back then, films that just used to like pump out like Hackman did
yeah,
30 of these films a year and
Enemy
10
of the
of
State
10
and
of the
stuff like
yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, but no, I'm just just even like back in the 70s, it's like where it's just like
Oh, okay.
70s and 80s, where it's just like these films would just come out like every fucking week. Yeah, one out of five it was great. The other four were we can just not remember that because okay.
Yeah.
It was bad. And like not thinking that it's but it's like you don't have access to any of that
Yeah.
cinema whatsoever unless you buy it either physically or buy it on Amazon, buy a
Yeah.
12.99 down. I was like, I wouldn't pay for a digital download of the package.
Right.
I wouldn't pay 12.99. I wouldn't pay whatever they do.
Mhm.
I think I got it on sale if I bought it. I'm trying to remember how I actually saw it, but
Yeah.
it's just one of those is like they're missing out on this entire world. And so it's just like it's something I kind of give whenever I the kind of the TikTok movie reviewers and things like
Yeah.
that. Obviously there's a lot of good ones that do delve into,
Yeah.
actual cinema history, but there's a lot of it's just like how the fuck else do you have access to it unless you are spending money?
A
I
bunch of
mean,
money. Yeah.
we used to do 5 for 5 for 5 at our
Yeah,
video rental
exactly.
stores. I could get that's the reason I've seen like 10,000 films in my high school years
Mhm.
because I also was a little bit of a
Yeah.
loser and that's what we did.
Yeah.
We watched movies on
Um,
on a Friday night. But yeah, anyway.
the other thing that, like, and again, like this could be a whole episode and probably
Yeah.
should be, but I'm going to say
That's
it
why I
so we
was just
remember.
like I should have told. Yeah,
Um, the the other thing that does is that it creates this, like, you've got all these people on social media talking about how, like, Hollywood's just swill now, and it's
yeah,
like, no, fucking Hollywood's always been swill.
yeah,
Those, because the thing is, like, the one good Hackman movie ends up on Hulu, and the
yeah,
other four you have to go out and seek. They're on
yeah,
Criterion Plus, or they're on um DVD only, or what,
yeah,
what, stars or something. It's like, so you have this warped view of the past of Hollywood, where it's like,
mm,
no, every movie that came out in the 80s was The Breakfast Club and Back to the Future, and it's like, no, it wasn't. It really,
yeah,
really wasn't.
yeah,
Like the
yeah,
the yes, there, because I specifically, I'm thinking there was a meme I saw yesterday that was like, these are the movies that came out in 1985, and look what we've
yeah,
got coming next year.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it's just like, yeah, but like those 25 movies are 2% of what
yeah,
came out
yeah.
in that year. And a huge chunk of what came out in that year was like directed VHS
Yeah.
slop that nobody remembers. And a
I
huge
just
chunk of,
Yeah. What I always love is that like people, think about Stallone's like Stallone had an epic has and had an epic career.
mhm,
Where it's just like the Rocky, several Rocky films are fantastic, several of them, not all of them, but
yeah,
Rambo, whatever. And then he did Over the Top, which was an
yeah,
arm wrestling movie. And that was like, and that still was, I think it did really well. I have a
I think
like
it did, yeah.
it's like
I mean,
prominent enough in my brain that it must have done it at least had some significance. But it's just
well,
like
and it did well enough that he signed on to do like three more movies with Canon, which is how we got Cobra.
yeah.
Um,
Well, but it's just like, but that's like, it's funny because it's like we didn't necessarily have like this. Obviously had a ton of sequels. We had the Rocky, but like
yeah,
they didn't come out. There wasn't the entourage, not entourage, but the like huge number
Barrage,
of, yeah,
yeah,
of like all the Marvel films, all the sequels to the Marvel films, all the DC films, all the sequels to the DC films that we feel like, oh, it's just everything sequels.
yeah,
But there was just basically like they weren't sequels, but like they were just the same character. To an extent, it's
yeah,
like kind of Jason Statham might have been one of the last kind of people that did a lot of this as well, where it was just he was just pumping out like films that basically was the same. There's oh my God, there's two films that he did within 3 years that he plays a bad cop who gets hooked up with a good cop to go and solve a crime and he does his fighting and
yeah,
whatever. And it's just like that. Actually, now I'm thinking about it, I think there's like three or four of those. Like
oh,
because
I'm sure,
he just kind of played the dirty cop or whatever, and
mhm,
it's just like that stuff was the 90s. Like that was like if
yeah,
we want to talk 90s and early 2000s where it's just like before Marvel and DC kind of
yeah,
became a thing in the way that they did. And it's just like that shit was like that was what our sequels were. And our terrible
yeah,
kind of like it just was the same idea, just rehash it with sometimes
yeah.
the same fucking actor, change out the co-star,
Yeah.
and that's it.
It's funny
Jet Li
because like
this time, not
nowadays when that happens, it's always a joke because
Mhm.
like we're all terminally online and we see
Mhm.
it.
Yeah.
But like I remember this year, Russell Crowe had two different movies come out where he was an exorcist.
Yeah, only
Um,
one though he rides on a Vespa. Um,
yeah, but I heard about them and I was listening to some review or something, and it was
yeah.
like the second one that came out, which I think was just called The Exorcism,
Mhm.
um, was actually produced before The Pope's Exorcist, but
Yeah.
like ran into financing problems, couldn't get prints made, some weird thing, I don't know. And so like it comes out and it underperforms because everybody's like, "Oh no, he's just like riding the coattails of the other movie he did." And
Yeah.
it's like, "No, the other movie, he hadn't even signed on for it when he wrapped production on this
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
It's just like money. Like you
Yeah.
ran out of money to pay an editor or some nonsense."
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I do love
but
the
like
idea that yeah,
no, I
that
was just
he
gonna,
per yeah,
but that used to be super common. Like you'd have
yeah.
like there was the whole joke that John Cusack just played the same character with different names in every movie.
Yeah. I just think of it like basically he personally did his own Armageddon and Deep Impact. Like he himself just like did two of the same film just twice.
Yeah,
And so it's just like where it's just like the same idea of those two films when they come out at the same time. And it's
yeah.
just like, no, it's the Russell Crowe, like whatever. We did have talking about like the 70s era, like one of the biggest films, I don't know if you got I don't think we've ever talked about it, so it may not say Rebel Ridge, which was straight out of 1970s. It could have been whether it be a John Carpenter film, it could have been like one of those like kind of just general like dirty cop, good guy who's
Yeah, it's got the
complicated.
Walking Tall kind of vibe.
Yeah, yeah, but like in like more of a this one, I mean, Rebel Ridge is certainly more along, I would say more along of these cops are fucking bad.
Well, yeah,
And it's not that it's this, great white hope kind of like Walking Tall
yeah.
is a little bit more. I mean, maybe that's my like remembrance of the earlier version, not the older
I'm
version of the
honestly,
one.
I'm just
But yeah.
thinking of like the franchise
Yeah,
holistically. Now,
yeah,
I can't remember
yeah.
anything about any one movie.
But you also with Rebel Bridge, you also have this fantastic kind of again like oh my God, the uh New York City cop John Carpenter film. Um I'm
Escape from
horrible.
New York.
No, not Escape. The one that's Precinct.
Oh, yeah, Assault
Oh
on
yeah, yeah.
Precinct
Yeah, I saw it on Precinct 9, 6,
9,
14.
19, something.
We really do know films, I promise. But
I
hold on a minute.
remember
Let me check my Assault on Precinct 13.
13. There we
Check
go.
my John Carpenter anthology. Um,
Uh,
but
it's what's funny is that I remember that movie primarily. Didn't Spike Lee do a remake, or was that Antoine Fuqua? Somebody did
I think it was
one.
Fuqua. That wasn't
And we
that
had
good,
it at
sadly.
Blockbuster when I was there in like 2008.
Mhm. Yeah,
Um,
it sadly wasn't good.
but yeah,
This is fantastic. I mean, this is like absolutely fantastic. Like
and
the
that's the one
everything.
with Aaron Pierre, right?
Yes, yeah,
He's one of those dudes who like I'm very happy to see him blowing up because
yeah,
like not only is he terrific in just everything,
yeah.
but from firsthand experience, very very nice guy. Like I
Yeah.
got to know him a little bit when I was in Belfast for Krypton,
Mhm.
and he just like
That's a good thing,
everybody on that cast was super cool, and I'm very very happy. Same thing with Georgina Campbell,
yeah. Mhm.
who did, gosh, what was that horror movie she did this year? Barbarian.
Oh yeah,
Um, and she was terrific in that, but like she got a ton of critical love for that, and it's like I'm happy to see her blowing up too.
yeah.
Cameron Cuff, who played the main character on Krypton, hasn't quite blown up in the same way some of his co-stars have, but I'm looking forward to when he does. He supposedly was like the number two choice and almost got the job of Prince Eric in the live action
Oh
Little Mermaid thing.
yeah, yeah.
And so like this close to like becoming a household name. Obviously Aaron, after having done um, Rebel Ridge, just starred as Mufasa in the new Lion King movie.
Oh, he does.
Um,
Oh yeah,
yeah, he would because the James Earl Jones was not healthy enough to do it, and so they
yeah,
went out and found somebody to be young Mufasa, and it was Aaron.
yeah. Nice.
Um,
I mean, this is also. I mean, it's very sidetracked, but like
yeah,
this is
yeah,
also the year of Don Johnson, who is absolutely fantastic in this. Plays exactly the role that he needs to play. It's also in my favorite TV show, which one of my favorite TV shows. Really, just bad, like 1980s, like it was basically The Love Boat. Is Doctor Odyssey. I
yeah.
don't know why I love this. so fucking much, but it is so much fun. But anyway, but that
Mm,
was just a sidetrack. I did want to say, because it's like Rebel Ridge, again, it's another $40 million
yeah,
basically blockbuster. It was number one on Netflix for ages, which
yeah,
Lord only knows how those metrics work or whatever. Which again, like I do feel this has been one of my biggest rants is we need to figure out a way to quantify what that
yeah,
is and say, okay, obviously we can't say this was a $250 million box office success,
right,
but we can say that it was the equivalent financially or whatever value
right.
added to Netflix that people maybe signed up or whatever, because it's just like this film, if this film had been released in theaters and got the amount of buzz, the number of people watching it, it would be
Hmm.
probably a $350 million film on $40
Right,
million.
exactly.
dollars. And then Hollywood would be like, holy shit, we need to make 75 more of these. And
Yeah,
we can do the $40 million action film again. And that's fine. And it's just like, and this is a film, if you watch the film, I highly recommend it. I'm not going to do, any
yeah.
spoilers, not really spoilers necessarily. It's guy takes on a small
Yeah.
police, whatever.
God,
Um, yeah.
who was the who was the lead corrupt cop in that? Because oh, that was Don Johnson.
Yeah, yeah, Don Johnson. Yeah, yeah. No, there's
I
some
was
like
just like,
great,
I
like,
just
yeah.
remember thinking like, oh, what a great performance, what a but like, I'm like crossing my wires. There was another, and it was not nearly as good, but it came out around the same time. There was a like a dirty cop movie, that Frank Grillo was in, um,
Oh,
and
is it not Cop? Oh my God, I want to go Copland. They're both in the bottom. They're both in. It was a Paramount film, right? Or
I
maybe not
think it was like
Paramount
a
or
Lionsgate
Peacock,
Paramount distributed, but it was like
but it was yeah.
there was like a I think there was like a Fight Club, but Jamie, the main villain was Jamie, the blonde girl, not the one from Sin City.
Yeah.
Uh,
Uh, I'm blanking because this I actually like that film a lot.
it was good.
That I think you're
It
talking about.
wasn't nearly as good as Rebel Ridge, but it was a
Oh,
good
Cop.
movie.
It was a cop shop you're talking about?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, back in
But
2020. That was 2021. Yeah.
oh no,
Some
no,
two.
no, no,
But no.
that's not it. I might give me a
Oh,
second.
okay.
Let me because like this was definitely this year because the article never ran because I didn't get it transcribed in time for before I got laid off. Lights Out. Um,
Oh,
he
okay.
plays like an ex cop who went to jail and then like comes back out and there's a fight club and it was a very weird, very kind of silly premise, but it was really well done. And
Mhm.
Grillo and Jamie King were both really great in it. And there's
Oh shit.
something really like when you get a movie like that, there's something really cool about having somebody like Jamie King be like the mob boss who's
Yeah.
running all the corrupt cops and
Yeah.
like she's like 90 pounds soaking wet, but everybody in the movie's terrified of her.
Yeah.
Um,
I have not I love Frank Grillo and I have not he's become one of my go-to, like if he's in the film, no matter how it looks or
yeah.
what it looks like, I see it and
I can't
50
remember who directed that
50% of
movie,
the
but
time.
it's one of those B
Uh
movie guys who he's worked with like six times. And so
Christian
if you go
Christian Sesma.
Yeah, if you go look at his thing, it's like, oh, there's a bunch of Frank Grillo B movies in there. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
No, but
uh, but yeah, I talked to everybody for that movie, and I don't think any of those interviews ever ran, or maybe the Jamie King one ran. I feel like I remember transcribing that.
yeah.
Um, oh, and you know what? I definitely ran something from Frank because Frank said something about like working at DC. And
Mhm.
so
Yes.
like but it was like I talked to them in October and
Mhm.
I was laid off by the end of October and
Yep.
October was a crazy month for interviews because like of all the TV shows coming back and stuff. So
Yeah.
it's like I still have a bunch of stuff that like never ran anywhere because like I got
Mhm.
laid off before I had a chance to place it.
Yeah.
Um
Yeah.
and so but anyway, that movie was fun. It's not like I said, it's not nearly as good as Rebel Ridge, but it came out around the same time as Rebel Ridge and was also like a dirty cop movie.
Yeah.
And so in my brain, I was getting Jamie King and Don Johnson a little twisted because I was like, wait a second, wasn't there a woman in charge of that? No, other one. Um,
Yeah, no.
uh,
Did you end up seeing Abigail? I feel like we must have talked about it.
no,
The
I never got it yet.
vampire film. Oh man,
Yeah,
it
I know.
is. That is another one of like obviously like horror this year and even last year just seems to be like that's where like a lot of the like really good lower not low
Yeah,
budget but like lower budget cinema film is happening. And Abigail was so much fun. It was just, closed down house, basically
yeah.
people just robbed or kidnapped its kid. Um,
Hmm.
and then now they have to deal with her as they find out that
Yeah,
spoilers that she's a vampire. I mean,
yeah,
if you look at the movie poster, she has blood on
yeah.
her. Anyway, it's not
Yeah,
really
I
spoilers.
remember the logo. Yeah.
I
Um,
somehow managed to not, again, it was one of those, I'm like, I have a vague idea of like, there's a
yeah,
vampire, there's something. And so like it actually, because I, like, this is actually one of the great things about not working in entertainment journalism at all is that like, basically like
yeah,
I'll see like something about a film and then I just shut off and I'm like, I'm not watching this. I'm not seeing anything about it.
yeah,
Like I did the same thing with Rebel Ridge where it's just like, dirty cop guy. One guy goes up a bunch of dirty Southern cops, North Carolina cops,
mhm,
Southern cops, and I'm like, that's all I need to know.
yeah.
And thankfully, like it was
Um,
absolutely fantastic. But
yeah, and it's funny because I was talking to somebody the other day about the fact, like you touched on the idea of like
Mhm.
all these horror movies that are um like lowish budget,
Yeah,
and it's like on Reddit in the public domain subreddit,
yeah,
somebody was like, why is it always slasher movies? Why do they always? And it's like, because that's the only, like, if you've got no money for a budget, horror is one of the only places where you can have any chance of making
yeah,
money.
yeah,
And so like, yeah, like it's lazy and it's low effort, but it's also like if you think you can do something interesting with it,
yeah,
like then people are going to try it because it doesn't cost anything to like be, and people bitching about it on the internet gives you free press. And
yeah,
so
yeah.
like
I mean, it's
Popeye
also, I mean,
Man is going to do all right, you know?
it teaches you a lot of things, especially if you're going to make a first film that's going to be like lower budget. Like that's why James Gunn is this incredible director, is that he knows how to do fucking
Yeah.
everything and he knows how to do everything on a nickel, as
Yeah.
opposed to a lot of directors who are like, if you took Scorsese and gave him tried to do a horror film, it would probably cost 150 million dollars.
Yeah.
James Gunn, you give him a horror script, he can probably do it on $52 in a bus ticket, because
Yeah.
he used to work at Troma, and it's just like that kind of
Yeah.
those people that come out of that world, often end up being really, I mean, John Carpenter is,
Yeah.
the best, one of the best
And
directors, in
also
my
like,
opinion, of the past 40 years.
oh,
Yeah.
for sure, yeah. And
Yeah.
and the other thing about that, and this applies to both Carpenter and Gunn, although definitely more to Gunn, I think, but like guys who come up in horror and guys who come up in low budget indie stuff tend to
Mhm.
come in on time and under budget way more than anybody
Yeah.
else.
Yeah.
It's like James Gunn made a Superman movie. I don't know how much he spent, but it wasn't anything close to what they spent on the last Aquaman, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like they did 3 days of reshoots because like all they needed was a few pickup shots where it was like, ah, shit, I had him looking over his shoulder there,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, because
Yeah.
like he plans everything, he storyboards everything, he works like he's still working with $15 million instead of 150,
Yeah.
and like that has served him incredibly well, not just in the sense that he's in a prominent position in Hollywood right now, but like
Yeah.
with the Guardians movies, like they were some of the only movies that were done on time, on budget, and with relatively few reshoots of
Yeah.
the last 10 years of Marvel. Because like as Marvel spun more and more out of control, Gunn was still running his set like a fairly low budget film.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
one other a good and you haven't seen this one because I don't think anybody can see it yet. But there's a movie called Dead Male that I saw this year. Um, it was they sent me a screener so I could talk to them ahead of South by Southwest, and then the movie got like blew up at South by, and now it's doing a film like a festival circuit because I
Yeah.
can't remember who picked it up, but um really really fun, really clever. I wouldn't go so far as to say a horror movie, but it's
Hmm.
like this guy is kidnapped and being held in someone's basement and manages to get out just long enough to put like a help me letter in the mail, but
Yeah.
there's no stamp. Um, And
Yeah.
so your main character is this postal inspector who finds this thing in the dead letter office
Yeah.
and is trying to find the kidnap victim based
It's
on
nice.
like context clues.
Yeah.
Um, and it's like there's serious stuff in there, and like the main character, like basically the kidnap victim has been kidnapped because he's the only friend of the kidnapper, and
Yeah.
he's about to move for work. And there's a real movie in there, and there's like some psychological stakes and all this kind of stuff. But like also your main character is like this guy who's a postal inspector who's treating
Mhm.
it like it's the most serious job in the world, which in this one instance turns out to actually be true, and there's an actual
Yeah.
life
Yeah.
on the line. But like, there's something kind of inherently ridiculous and almost kind of Columbo-y about the guy.
Nice.
Um, and like, really enjoyed the movie. Thought that all of the people involved with it were really cool. And I'm looking forward to when that becomes more widely available. Like I say, as far as I know, right now it's still out in the festival circuit. Um, but it got a lot of festival buzz, and my understanding is that they wanted to do like a real, um, like a at least a mid-sized theatrical run.
Yeah. No,
Uh,
that's,
but
but I mean,
that's another like,
I think that like also with horror, it ends up being a horror thriller, obviously two separate, but
yeah,
still, whatever. Is that it ends up being like one of the places that you can explore ideas that would be normally just a kind of a necessarily it would be like you'd have to really produce it, really make sure that it's this beautiful,
yeah,
kind of like every single part of it needs to be to um but if you add a little slasher to it, becomes an
yeah,
easier, not necessarily easier, but like because obviously that causes its own problems upon itself. But
right.
it's like it is ends up causing an interest. Like it's also like
Yeah.
something to
Well,
be
you
like,
get a
oh, that's yeah,
instantly there's a hook. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. And it's just like, and also like you have a horror is one of the places that like die hard. You know what I mean? Like there's still like magazines that devoted to horror that romantic comedies
Exactly.
don't
Like
have that.
if you have exclusive
Like,
clips,
yeah,
suddenly you can go to Fangoria
yeah, yeah, no.
because like you don't have to rely on Deadline and Hollywood Reporter to like take interest.
Yeah, because
Um,
I mean, also because I mean, like, let's think like there's a billion, there's not maybe not a billion, but there's a probably 100,000 independent movies, full length films that are released every single year, and
mhm.
we don't know any of them because they're just
Yeah,
either they don't ever actually get released and they're like on some person's hard drive somewhere, or they're on YouTube, or they're wherever, because there's just not that market. I mean, it's something we discovered with like documentaries. There's
yeah,
just not a documentary. Like we ended up releasing our documentary on YouTube. At the end of it, we had a like there's a kind of a special like theatrical like release where you can still
yeah,
do it, that we did for a while, and then finally we just gave up because it was people don't like giving their emails and doing this whole process and don't, and finally just dropped it on YouTube. I think we're probably up to about 100,000 views on YouTube. Uh, Lord only knows what that actually means, how much people watched or whatever, because of the way YouTube
right.
works. But like, there just isn't a place for documentaries now, in the same way that there isn't a
Yeah,
place for releasing actual independent film that isn't a
right.
genre. If it's just a
Yeah,
film that like, if it's a film that would Ray Fiennes and Meryl Streep would be in, but you don't have Ray
yeah,
Fiennes and Meryl Streep. It's just your friends. That it may be a
yeah,
fantastic film. We'll never know because there's just isn't a place for it.
yeah,
Where they are? They're on Vimeo, and that's
yeah.
it. And you have to be able to find it because Vimeo is completely not searchable. It's not. It's
Oh
a
God, it's
storage. It might as well
yeah,
be Dropbox. And I mean, like that's where also it's incredibly fucking expensive for an independent filmmaker,
yeah,
as we also discovered, because even if you
yeah,
pay for the enterprise package, it still has a limit on how much people can watch it, and it's not that high. You can pay
yeah. It's
$200 a month
nuts.
for it, and it's not that much anyway. Um, but it ends up being YouTube, or ends up being
Yeah,
Vimeo on like a private account behind a login where you have to pay,
yeah,
some money, which is understandable. But it's kind of a depressing thing where it's just like I'm about my plan for this coming year is I'm doing a Kickstarter in a couple days for a
mhm.
documentary that I've been talking about and working on for the last 8 years
four
probably.
years.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, whether it's different versions of it, whatever.
Yeah,
And it's just like one of those, I'm like, how are people, I still haven't figured out the like, how are people seeing this? Because I don't, you have to walk into any film not with the realistic kind of nature. It's like,
Right.
unless I get somebody, I mean, on the other hand, I'd say unless you get somebody attached to it. And I'm like, on the other hand, Martin Sheen and executive was the executive producer, and Rosario Dawson did our
Yeah.
narration, and we didn't get a release. And even with all the connections and everything like that that we have, like, could not get a release because it was about voting rights and nobody gives a shit.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing, but it'd be kind of equivalent with, if you're trying to do an independent, if you're trying to release Clerks, now,
Yeah.
or, any number of like really not Reservoir Dogs, which is the action fighting thing, but like any of just like, oh,
Right.
just it's just a good quiet film, like try to release the
Yeah.
Anniversary Party if it didn't have all of these actors, famous people attached to them. Now, good luck. Nobody's going to see it. Nobody's going to be able to see it. Nobody able to find it because no one's writing about that cinema, sadly. I'm sure there's blogs and TikToks out there, but unless it goes
Right.
viral. Anyway, and rant. I'm still a little.
Uh,
I have my box cutter. I'm still a little pissed off about this release of
yeah.
my film. But yeah,
The last three things I'm
yeah,
gonna mention, and I think we mentioned these in passing in a previous
hmm
episode, but like they're like things that I really enjoyed that we haven't already talked about.
yeah.
Of all things my kids made me watch, I really enjoyed The Wild Bot. I thought it was really well done.
Still,
Um,
I still
it,
need to see that. Like, I see clips on it, and it just looks adorable and amazing, and it looks gorgeous.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's not quite as smart as I had hoped based on trailers, but it's not far off, and it's a very like it's really beautifully done. Um, gosh, I can't. Oh, the weirdest part of the movie is Pedro Pascal, playing this Fox
Okay,
character
yeah,
who like he doesn't sound to me like Pedro
yeah.
Pascal. And in fact, when I was watching the movie, I was thinking like, is that Jason Bateman? And of course, Jason Bateman is a
Very good.
fox in a different movie.
Yes,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
and so like, I don't know how much of that was my brain just like playing tricks on me, and how much of that is the
Mhm.
fact that like no, he just sounds like Jason Bateman in this movie.
Yeah.
But it was a really weird thing that I was like, I got like halfway through the movie, and I'm like, there's no way this is Bateman. Who is it? And I
Yeah.
looked, and I was like, Pedro it doesn't sound anything like him. Um, but like really I would of all the kids movies I watched this year, I'd probably recommend that one the most. Trying to think if there was anything else that jumped at me like that. Um the like I still have not sat down and watched all the way through Chicken Run 2. Um
I forgot that was released. Oh my God.
yeah, it was only on Netflix, didn't come to theaters, and um they replaced like half the cast because a few people had passed away, and Mel Gibson is Mel Gibson, and
Yeah.
um, they did unintentionally perfect casting by replacing Mel Gibson with Zach Levi. Uh,
Oh
but
God. That poor
just
casting director is like, we worked hard, we found somebody, he's got a big name, he's going up. Motherfucker. God damn it.
yeah. But yeah, that was that. But I haven't watched that whole thing. Like my son has put it on a bunch of times, and I've seen
Mhm.
bits and pieces. It seems fine. It doesn't seem nearly as good as the first one. Um, like I said, I watched Inside Out 2 and Harold and the Purple Crayon way too many times for my liking this year. But
Yeah.
the other two movies, and again, I know I mentioned these in passing during one episode, but Road Diary, which is a documentary about Springsteen's most recent tour,
Mhm.
which I thought really elevates like it elevates. I don't want to say the source material per se, but like when I Tom Zimney, who directed this, has done a bunch of like mini docs and feature length docs and like behind the scenes stuff for various different DVDs and CDs and stuff for Springsteen. And
Mhm.
the I for the most part they're good in terms of that kind of content,
Yeah.
but with one or two exceptions, it's not something you would sit down and watch.
Yeah.
Like I think the Wings for Wheels documentary that he did on the Born to Run 40th anniversary set is the closest thing to like a real movie that you're like, I want to watch that again just for being that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
But Road Diary does stand on its own as a good movie, independent of being like a bonus feature to a Springsteen concert.
Yeah.
And structurally, I thought it was really well done because he basically structured the whole movie around the set list. And so then you could kind of tell the same story that Springsteen is telling in the concerts, you could tell with the movie.
Yeah.
Which, given the nature of this exact tour, is a really smart way to do it because, like, the tour itself had a very specific narrative core to it. There's actually a lot. It's one of those tours where a lot of big songs are omitted because it's more important that he talks about like mortality and all the themes of the tour than it is that he
Yeah.
goes out there, you know. And then the last thing I wanted to make sure I mentioned because I don't talk about it in the your thing is Winona Earp Vengeance.
Yeah.
They did like it's on Tubi. So you can't see it without ads. um,
Yeah.
but really glad to see that group back together. Like it's a great cast. The movie itself I thought was good, not great. But the performers are so good and the world is so fleshed out that you're like, no, this is really it's kind of like the first Psych movie where I look back at it now and I'm like, yeah, it's not as good as I remembered. But like it was really nice to like be back in that space and it was great to see these people doing these roles again. I did cheat and I made myself a VHS copy off of my screener.
Yeah.
So it's watermarked and has my name on it and it's in 480p, but I can watch the movie without ads.
There you go. There you go. What would you say? I'll do two for here because I think they're two different. What would you say is the best film of the year that you've seen, obviously? And what would you
Yeah.
say is your favorite film you watched this year?
Oh God. My favorite is probably the 430 movie, honestly. Like
Mhm.
I really and again, like part of that is just the Kevin Smith of it all. Like I always like his specific thing speaks to me in a way that a lot of other and and like his vibe works for me. So I think that like probably that's my favorite movie of the year just on the strength of like
Yeah.
it being what it is. Uh God, in terms of the best, it's for me to say Superman is up there.
Say that again.
The
Just you
documentary.
say that again. You just kind of digitized a little bit.
Yeah, our connection suddenly sucks. Superman, the
Oh,
Chris
okay.
Reeve documentary, is
Yeah.
right up there. And just in terms of like really well executed. I mean, it's very by the numbers. It's exactly what you expect it to be.
Hmm.
But like I don't know that there's much when you're in documentary, I don't know that there's much value to surprise
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
that kind of story. Um, you know, Dead Mail is another one that I think is really like well done on a technical level.
Hmm.
And I watched a documentary called Tell Me You Love Me, which again kind of by the numbers. It's a little melodramatic because it's a Netflix thing, but it's very
Hmm.
powerful. It's about a nonverbal person, not with autism. I think it's I can't remember what cerebral palsy maybe, um,
Hmm.
and like how their caretaker was manipulating them and pretending like that he was communicating with her via his touch screen, um, when in fact she was just like doing all the talking for him and kind of manipulated him into a relationship as a result. And
Yeah.
so really, really unsettling, but really well made. I haven't seen a lot of like great narrative films this year. Like the more I think about
Yeah.
it, it's like I can't think of a really like a great film, capital G, that I watched this year
Yeah.
in theaters. Part of that's me just not getting out to theaters very much, you know.
Yeah.
Um, Part of it is Syracuse and the fact that like I don't think anything that I've seen seriously discussed for an Oscar has been here.
Yeah. I know,
Um,
right? Same. Yeah.
um, and I'm sure that there's probably something that I saw and that I'm forgetting and I'm gonna feel stupid later, but I just nothing jumps out at me as like objectively the best film I watched this year.
Yeah.
Um, I mean it very well in terms of just like craftsmanship might be dead male, which again, like I just talked about a minute ago, and it's like a really niche, really weird thing, but it's incredibly well made and it's unexpected. Like that's the thing is everything else I've seen that's really well made, um, is kind of like exactly what you expect from it and not
Yeah.
like engaging or surprising in a visceral way. Um, I do think like I mean there's a lot of stuff this year that came out that it's just like there's a level of satisfying to it, but it's not what
Yeah.
Deadpool and Wolverine is a great example of a movie that's just like it's exactly what you thought it was going to be, and it was a lot of fun, particularly on the first watch. But like, is it great? Other than the fact that obviously Levy is a really good filmmaker who's put together a lot of complex technical pieces in a
Yeah.
in a specific kind of way. Like it's not a great movie. Um,
God, I finally watched it maybe a week ago.
mhm.
I really didn't like it. Like I was pissed. I was actually kind of angry at the film because it was like to me it was like, we're talking about the auteur, getting away with everything.
Yeah,
This felt like Ryan Reynolds. It felt the whole film felt improv, which like is great and fun in scenes. Like Reynolds like does those films really well, but the whole fucking film like just felt like
well,
we're just going along with like whatever he thinks about on the day. The fight sequences were, and it's the like where they were, it just felt
mm,
like everything felt like it was on a green screen. And I know there was some practical stuff, but the entire film felt like it was done in an empty set, that there was no like in a way that like I mean obviously because it's big and these like big
yeah,
open spaces where the film the void of whatever they with that place that they go to, obviously you can't get
yeah,
away with some of it, but it's just like it felt like it so much of the first two Deadpool films were like his interaction with his love interest and
yeah,
who's been fantastic in the films, and then like his roommate who was just fun, just like a funny side character, and just
yeah,
kind of the interaction with that, and you had none of that in this film. Like it just felt like there was no like fun, and I'm sure they all had fun on the set, but it's just like every
yeah,
other
yeah,
the first two films just felt like everyone was having fun. This felt like we're trying to make a Marvel film, and the joke and the like the kind of like the looks to camera and the looks to like,
yeah.
oh no, we're doing a Marvel thing. Just was like, okay, for fuck's sake, I know that you're in the Marvel world now, but like that's
Right.
kind of what it felt like. It felt like they went into the
No, and
Marvel world, like this kind of
I
like
don't
heartless
agree with
world,
that.
Yeah.
I do think like it's funny because like one of the big problems you pointed this out with like Marina Baccarin's not in there,
Yeah.
Blind Al's barely in there. Obviously Weasel was never going to be in there because T.J. Miller's a piece of shit.
Yeah.
Um, but but like he lost a supporting cast and gained a shared universe, which is exactly what I'm constantly bitching about in comic books.
Yeah.
Like the
Yeah.
fact that everything is an event now, and if it's not an event, it's the thing that leads to the next event.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, like, in all of, like, no matter how good a superhero comic is, and no matter how much fun a superhero comic is, because I do think this movie was fun, um, like, it still suffers from not having a real supporting cast that can kind of ground
Yeah.
you in reality and humanity, and instead just being like everybody in your life is a superhero, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And
And it's
like,
just, yeah,
so that
especially
definitely like I didn't dislike it as much as you, and I couldn't remember if it was you or if it was another one of my friends who had really hated the movie. But
I just saw it like 2 weeks ago, a week ago, or something
yeah,
like that when I was back home, and I was actually surprised at how much I don't like it. I think honestly, you know what it was? It was taking, and I've seen somebody make this comment before, so I'm sure maybe it influenced me a little bit, but it was
right,
taking Logan, like a film that like was like this is what comic book movies could be like
right,
good film, like and like things that should win or at least be recognized in some way, that like, oh no,
yeah,
comic books aren't just comic book movies and comic books themselves are just being trash. It's
mm,
just like the legacy of just like reading comic books as a kid and being like, oh, you could be reading a real
yeah,
book kind of thing,
yeah,
and then making fucking fun of that film as if it was like a joke in like I, I know that I think I've read like seen interviews where discussions about it where they're kind of like lightheartedly talking about it as if like we recognize that we're taking this thing and we're making fun of
Yeah.
whatever, but it just felt like it didn't, I mean, it's just like there was a lot of ways that you could have done that, I feel, and not done it. I don't know. It's just it just felt like weirdly heartless on about a thing that also like who the fuck cares at a certain point? Like it's just
Right,
another.
right.
But on the other hand, it isn't just another comic book movie. It is a movie that came out and everyone's like, holy shit, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like the comic book movies can be good, and it's not just, oh, everyone crying at that Iron Man is dying or
Yeah.
something, which I thought was the end of that film was so fucking terrible. But like, so this was a film that actually, like, it was a comic book movie, kind of not by accident, but like,
Right.
in a way that, people talked about the fucking Joker. Logan
Yeah, yeah.
actually was that thing,
Right.
and
That's
like,
exactly, yeah.
and it was just like the comic book nature of Logan was vital. Unlike the Joker, where it's just like, oh, again, it's like we know why he made that film. It was just the
Yeah.
coincidence that I was like, okay, this is the way I can make the film that I want to make. Yeah, we just
Yeah, the
slap
king of
on the
comedy
fact that it's
too.
Joker. Yeah, and which I do love how much the sequel bombed because everyone realized realized, oh shit, he doesn't actually know how to make a film anyway. But yeah, no, so it's interesting because it's like I was really disappointed because like obviously I love Deadpool as a character. I love
Mhm.
Ryan Reynolds and almost everything he does. And man, that was just so disappointing. Also just kind of like, I don't know, I mean, the whole purpose of it was to throw away, and kind of kill off a bunch of characters that also were kind of beloved. So it was just like losing, all the different like comic book characters that were in there and being like, okay, they're technically dead now or evaporated or whatever, exploded or
Yeah,
whatever.
whatever.
And you're like,
It's
oh, that sucks.
it's interesting because like they've really tried to buy that back a little bit. Like obviously nobody died on screen. Um or one or two people, but not it and
I
like
was about to say, I'm pretty sure that
Human Torch. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I'm pretty sure he's dead.
But they've it's going to be real interesting the next 5 years is what I'll say. Like, because there's been a real groundswell of like, fuck it, give Wesley Snipes a Logan style wrap up movie for Blade.
Yeah,
Um, one of the people who said that was Reynolds. Um,
yeah,
but like the fact that the Blade movie has completely fallen apart. And apparently, they're
yeah,
just going to let Mahershala Ali's contract expire in spite of the fact that he's the only person who's been sitting there going, "No, I want to make this movie."
yeah, yeah.
Um, is fucking
I
nuts.
I don't
Um,
understand. I just don't. I mean, I don't
yeah,
think anybody actually understands on how that's happening.
no,
So
no,
that seems to be the biggest question of.
it's clearly like there's. It's funny because he's the opposite. It's like the opposite of. I don't know if you saw yesterday that they've cast Lobo in the Supergirl movie.
Yeah,
And it's Jason Momoa
yeah, because there's
who
only 12
has.
actors, but yeah,
Yeah, well, I mean, to be fair, at least Jason Momoa has been trying to play Lobo
yeah,
since
I
like
know.
5 years before he got Aquaman.
Yeah, no, I
Like,
saw the interview. Also, he's a great cast. I mean, it is like, let's not
yeah, oh
deny
yeah,
that he's
he's.
a perfect,
Uh,
like, I can't think of anybody
it's
else, but
funny
yeah.
because the only downside to it is that like you do have that thing of like so far we haven't had the best record of like doing these weird fan cast things.
Yeah,
It's like uh Jim from The Office got to be Reed Richards for about 17 seconds,
yeah,
and bringing back Michael Keaton was not exactly a rousing success.
yeah,
And Dwayne Johnson spent 20 years trying to be Black Adam, and we can all see how that played out.
yeah,
So like there is an element of like he's great casting.
yeah,
I really like him. I'm glad that he's getting to do this gig that he wants to do. But it feels like we're playing with fire a little bit here because
yeah,
every time we've done this, it's been a disaster. I guess the only
yeah,
exception being fucking Patrick Stewart, obviously. That seems
yeah,
to have paid off.
yeah. But also Patrick Stewart is Patrick Stewart playing
Yeah,
Patrick Stewart as that's the great thing about him, where he's just like, no, everybody knew he was going to be that, like from the
yeah.
moment that you'd be like, yeah, no, there's no one else that does bald like he does. Um, so, but yeah,
I
um,
still
yeah,
part of me is still very disappointed that we never got to see his Spider Jerusalem, but that's a whole other conversation.
yeah, yeah. God forbid. Now, the only problem with that is I'm terrified on eventually that property is going to end up becoming a thing. Weirdly, I think Warren Ellis's problems probably saved us from getting a bad film.
Yeah, oh
Because
yeah.
at some point, like if he, with all the other popularity, especially, I'm sure, I wish for Derek's sake, I hope that we do get it because I think that's his, you know,
Yeah.
it's my favorite work of his, which I'm sure.
Yeah, and I think it's the thing he's the most proud. I don't know. I can't speak for him, but like just talking
Yeah,
with him, it seems like he's very proud of Transmet. Obviously, it's hard not to be proud of the boys at this point because of the just massive success that it's had outside of
yeah,
comics. But like it was never Transmet in the comics, and
yeah,
especially like it was always really, really considered a Garth Ennis book that Derek just came in to draw.
yeah,
Whereas like Transmet, like as much as yeah, there's a lot of Warren Ellis in that DNA, it's impossible to break that away from Derek. Nobody else could draw
yeah,
that book.
yeah. I got
In
yeah,
a and like that's why you see Russ Braun doing the Billy Butcher spin-off and all that kind of stuff. And it's like there are other people who can draw the boys. There are other people who have and will draw the boys because like it's
mhm,
become a franchise unto itself. Um, and nothing can take away from Derek that he's the one who invented that world and established it all and blah 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 blah.
yeah,
But like when you look at Derek's pencils, like the first thing I think of is Transmet because it's just
mhm,
so completely owned by him. Nobody's ever done a story in that world except for him. Like they had those issues with some fill-in artists that were just like things that happened on the TV or pinups.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
but like,
And yeah, and even
uh,
as great as Rodney Ramos is, he's copying Derek. I mean, he's literally just
yeah,
doing Derek,
yeah, when
and
he does all of his
if
commissions and
that
stuff like that.
for
Yeah,
Transmet, he's done
yeah,
other things that are fantastic as well. But yeah,
yeah,
it's but yeah. Anyway, my very quickly because we've this was supposed to be a short thing,
yeah, yeah,
short rant. I don't know how we ever thought that like trying to do a year-end thing was going to be a short thing.
yeah.
Um, it's tough for me. I actually like Civil War. I think was the best film of the year, even though no one agrees with me. Um, I think it's probably I hope that it ends up being like considered one of the greatest action films, like war films ever made. I think it goes up there with like, Saving Private Ryan and things like that. Obviously, I will never deny that it has to do with because it covers people like me.
Right.
And it's just like a film about, I don't get, photojournalists, especially photographers get a lot of films. Photojournalists don't get shit.
Yeah.
Even though like for some reason, I feel like we have to physically be places, unlike reporters who can cover shit from New York or whatever. Um, but that was, I think for me, like the best film. I've seen it a couple times now. I own the physical media of it, and like it stood up even like I think it was better the second time I even watched it because it took away a lot of the just like oh my god, oh my god. And then I also obviously knew where everything was going.
Right.
So yeah, in theaters, I mean, I still say in theaters, I was having like PTSD for a couple moments because I literally worked in the
Yeah.
offices where like they're like murdering everybody in the scene anyway. Um that and I gotta it's a tough for like most fun and enjoyable like
Hmm.
I would say like I I, I I guess I have to go back to werewolves again. Like um it was just so much fun.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to seeing it again now that it's finally out on digital. I think I'm gonna wait to buy it on physical because the unless it drops in prices because it's like $25. It's
Yeah.
like it's a $20 rental, $25 thing, which I actually can't believe like my mom rented it because I was trying to force her to like when I was down in
Yeah.
Florida, I was trying to be like, oh, let's go. And it was, how my mom anyway, like I think all moms are like no, that's the bad movie theater, we can't go there, and I'm like what are you talking
Yeah.
about, it's in fucking Palm Beach. Like there's no bad movie theater. She's like there was a shooting there once anyway, and I'm like okay, it's Florida, every 12 foot there's a
Yeah.
shooting there once, but anyway, but yeah,
Mm.
no, and very quickly it was just like I'm trying to remember like the fact that Beverly Hills Cop Axel Foley came
Oh
out this
yeah,
year,
that
which
came
I
out.
thought thank God was good. Like it wasn't as great, but like it was at least as
No, but
good
it
as the
was
third one.
fine. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it wasn't like offensive to it wasn't like
No.
ruined it wasn't, Indiana Jones 4. Anyway, but Godzilla versus Kong, I did not think was good at all. And maybe that's because it came out like relatively soon after
Mhm.
year one.
Yeah.
which was just a fantastic fucking film, and this just felt like a cartoon, like a bad
Yeah.
cartoon. Yeah, Dune Part Two came out. It was another Dune film, in my opinion. But yeah, that's yeah. There's a bunch of other films, obviously, to talk about, like,
Yeah.
but like
Though
that's
I,
there's
I
no need
want to
to.
give honorable mention to my like dog of the year. Just because we talked about it, and again, I don't remember if this one ever went out there or if it was just a conversation we had. But Mr. Monk's Last Case, uh,
Oh, we
Peacock original Monk movie, which
yeah.
was just like holy shit,
I
like
thought we
what a
talked about this
terrible,
because I also agreed with you on the yeah.
just a terrible idea top to bottom. And it's I was talking about it again the other day because um, the scene at the end where all the ghosts of the people he helped come,
Oh,
um,
oh my
they
God.
were the filmmaker was like, well, that was Jesus Christ. It's a Wonderful Life. That was inspired by It's a Wonder. This whole movie is inspired by It's a Wonderful Life. That's why the suicide is hanging over the whole thing. And I'm just like,
But anyway, but
that is not the same kind of
yeah,
suicide, man.
yeah,
Like, this is not like because Jimmy Stewart didn't like finish every scene and be like, okay, I get it, I get it. Time to go kill myself though. Can you please let me? You know what I mean?
just drive
Like,
into the bridge, drive into that bridge every moment he gets, and be like, oh shoot, I
yeah,
guess we have to do another storyline. Yeah,
yeah. So like just and it's like one of those things. Like I was never the hugest fan of Monk, but I thought it was a
yeah,
good show.
yeah,
And like it just that movie so fundamentally misunderstands what people find appealing about the show, especially in
yeah,
hindsight. Because people who are
yeah,
rewatching it now for the 110th time aren't looking for um this character to be tortured and try to kill himself
yeah,
17
yeah,
times. Like they're looking for the version of the character they got in the last season or two where he'd made some strides and
yeah,
was like a happier person because like that's what happens when you make a fucking TV show and after 11 seasons people actually care about your characters.
yeah,
Um
yeah,
so just I don't know, I wanted to kick that movie one more time before the end of the year because like
yeah. I'm
holy
fine with
shit,
that.
just like so fundamentally misunderstood everything about what was
Yeah,
appealing about the show that they made a movie of. And it's like
yeah,
we've had three psych movies of varying quality, but
yeah,
like you waited 14 years or whatever it was to make a monk movie and that's what you came out with. And I'm just like, man, I don't get that.
yeah, yeah. I don't even. I mean, like, I don't even remember all of the things. Like,
Yeah.
it's just like usually there's like, oh, this is the reason, this is the one big reason I didn't
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that film. And I'm like flashing through my brain and I'm just like, I remember there's like 34 other things that was like standing
Yeah.
alone that would have been enough to kill my like Monk was
Yeah,
never
yeah.
like a big character for me or whatever, just didn't
Right.
never really caught. But like I at least it was something I think it was my aunt my aunt
Mm,
or my grandmother must have watched like so it was in background and it was just like okay, it's
yeah.
something I can sit and like I understand the character, I know what's going on.
Yeah.
And then just like, yeah, no. Oh my God. So many fucking things.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
again, I probably would never have thought of that movie again, except for that I'm sitting here looking at my letterbox and I'm just like, oh my God, that's right. I had to watch that this year.
Lord. Anyway.
What a
Yeah.
year to give up drink.
Yeah.
All right. Any final thoughts, Mr. Z?
Uh nope, nope. That's it. I would say I'm looking forward to the Bluey movie. I just literally have
Yeah.
I have Muffin. It's
Nice.
standing. So I literally looked over. I'm like, oh, Muffin. It's the border collie in there, so that's why I have it.
Yeah.
I bought it for somebody, and then I decided to keep it myself. Um, yeah, no, that's I honestly I think that might actually be the number one thing I'm looking forward to this year is like going because I love going to the movies, and like that's gonna be a fun film to see in the movies. With with people and everything like that. So it'll
Yeah.
be cool. So that's a very
Yeah.
random
I'm
thing.
excited about Superman,
Yes,
obviously.
obviously, yeah. Yeah.
I want to see Bluey, and I'm sure there's a couple other things, but
I
like
think
those are
I,
the two things
I think the problem with
top of
Superman is that I'm so worried. Is that like I it's like there's James Gunn has to like fall at some point. Like he has to make a bad kind of thing,
Yeah,
like whatever. Like as much as I didn't necessarily like the third Guardians, but still, it's like on the scale of all the films, it was,
right.
all the Marvel films, it's still in the top five, maybe six, maybe six. But I worry. I don't know. It's just like the moment I saw the
No,
dog, like
I
Crypto,
get it.
super excited for Crypto because he looks formed. But it's, yeah. Anyway, either way. I'm not looking forward to the fandom. Like I'm already
No.
reading like his threads. And honestly, that's the only thing. I just have to stop like reading people's response to anytime they post a trailer or post anything, because honestly, that like ends up, I think, killing my like excitement for this film,
Yeah.
or anything, any film, but especially the Superman films. And even, like I've already seen enough of the trailers for the new Captain America, and I'm already like, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and that one's gonna kill me because like I have no enthusiasm for it just because like
yeah,
nothing about it looks appealing to me. But I also know that there's a bunch of people really upset that like there's a black Captain America,
yeah, yeah,
and I'm like, that movie's gonna bomb for reasons unrelated to Howard Mackie
yeah,
and or
Anthony,
Anthony Mackie. Howard
yeah,
Mackie's a comic book writer, so I do that all the time.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
But it's gonna bomb for reasons unrelated to Anthony Mackie, and then Disney is gonna knee jerk blame it on diversity.
yeah.
Um,
The one thing I'm looking forward to though with that film is Harrison Ford doing press.
oh
Because
yeah,
it's going to be fucking, it's already been great, because he's
yeah,
been doing a bunch of press for Shrinking, which now I have to watch now, because
yeah,
all of
yeah.
his press for it, I'm just like, and I've seen clips and I'm like, oh yeah, I got to see this, like,
And Luke Tenney is
but
in it, who was in Deadly Class. So
nice,
one of my Deadly Class peoples there.
nice. But like he's gonna have a lot of fun because this film is like he's doing this film because he's like, why the fuck not?
Yeah,
And money, I guess, or something. I don't know what, but
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I it's one of the reasons I really want to talk to Parker Posey about Josie one of these days because
yeah,
at the time when she was making that movie, she used to
yeah,
tell everybody like that she was doing it to pay for a beach house, I think.
yeah,
There was something like that was like her line.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and so like now that it's 20-ish years later and the movie's a cult classic and all that kind of stuff, I really want to talk to her about again. Like I would love to do like an actors on actors thing where you get Alan
yeah.
Cumming
That would
and
be so much fun.
Parker Posey to talk to Sandra Bernhardt and
Yeah.
Richard Grant.
Yes. Just switch them up. I will
The
say though,
most
with Parker Posey though, like I think that like every actor has that one film that wasn't well received, wasn't whatever. Like, just like
yeah,
Bruce Willis would have Hudson Hawk, and he would, if you
right,
talk to him about Hudson Hawk, or Malcolm McDowell, we talked to him about Oh Lucky Man, he was like, oh,
yeah.
I don't know if that was badly received. I don't think it was badly received or
I
anything
think it
like
was
that.
pretty well received. I don't think it
But
was the
yeah,
like
but it
it
wasn't.
definitely wasn't it.
It's the film that he doesn't, that he wants to talk about, that no one.
Yeah, yeah,
Obviously, when we talked to him, he was like, his agent pulling him away. But with Parker Posey, like every film she does is like a cult classic. Like
yeah,
there's very few films that like she has done that somebody isn't like, somebody isn't somewhere writing a book about Best in Show or whatever, whatever
yeah.
that, all of her films or whatever, whatever small, oh my God. Uh, shit. I'm trying to remember her first, the director that she worked with Adrian. Anyway, went to SUNY Purchase and
Todd Haynes, Todd.
not Todd not, I know that there was somebody before that, that
Oh,
actually graduated from SUNY Purchase, film
okay.
school. So it was always like, that was the director that we're all, it was like,
Yeah.
oh, he graduated from there. And it was just like, yeah. But anyway, but yeah, that's, she, but yeah, no, but I would absolutely love, that would be the greatest thing ever to get
Yeah.
like the people like just randomly, let's talk about like this weird cult thing that
Yeah.
you're in. Yeah. But but yeah, weird way to
All
end.
right.
But yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
as
We're
always.
ending the year. We're ending the year the way we started it, just rambling largely about Hudson Hawk and Josie and the Pussycats.
Yes.
All right, everybody, thanks
Yep.
for listening. Be back here by noon on the fifth day for more Emerald City Video, and always remember to rewind your cassettes.